The Real Investment Show.
Good morning. Welcome back to the show. Yes, if you're on our YouTube channel, Brent Clanton crashed the Length Challenge bus this morning. So he's still working on technical difficulties.
Not funny.
I thought it was humorous. It's just, don't worry. It's just a few rim scratches. We can buff those out.
Yeah.
LeBron James, $170 million.
$170 million last year. Lionel Messi, $183 million.
Yeah. Here's the interesting thing about this, and Danny Ratliff joining me this morning, certified financial planner. We were talking about this off air for a second, just on the break, and it's amazing how much some of these people make, particularly in the sports world. If you take a look kind of across sports, there's these very highly paid athletes that make just tremendous amount. Now, not all of it is salary. A lot of it also, too, when you look at gross incomes, it's also endorsements and sponsorships and all this other stuff, but just a tremendous amount of money. Here's the point about this. The average median wage in the U.S. is around $55,000 to $58,000, and that was before you adjusted for inflation. Companies right now are replacing employees with robots because of rising wages. There was one of the largest jumps in the orders of robots last year that we've seen on record as wages were increasing. And we wrote an article about the cost and consequences of $15 hour minimum wage. Remember that whole conversation? It's like, we need a fair minimum wage. And it's like, hey, you can put people at $15, but what companies will do is go out and replace them with a robot, because a lot of jobs can be, at $15 an hour, there's a lot of jobs that can be replaced by a robot because they're pretty much, just kind of mundane jobs, flipping hamburgers, whatever. They actually created a hamburger flipping robot, just as an example. So a lot of those jobs can be replaced with robots. And the great thing about robots is that once you pay for them, they're paid for, and they don't ask for time off, benefits, those type of things, right? They show up every day to work. They're never late. They get their show started on time and, get things linked up. But these things, this is what's happening in the economy. And this is what goes to the heart of a lot of these conversations that we have when we talk about, a good example of this right now is like, is the economy going to go into a recession? Well, according to economists, the economy is very strong because there's a very high level of household savings. Well, the problem with that is that there is a very high level of household savings if you're in the top 10% of income earners, right? Because you've got a lot of discretionary income coming in, and you weren't really spending it during the pandemic shutdown. You've got everything you need. You're not going to go out and buy another, Rolls Royce or another mansion, that type of thing, because you've already bought everything you need. So once you're in those top earning income brackets, your spending pretty much stays the same regardless of what's going on in the economy. And if something happens in the economy where you don't travel, you don't go do things, well, you accumulate excess savings. However, once you drop below that level and get into really the bottom 90% of the economy, there are no excess savings. They're all living paycheck to paycheck. Inflation hits those people very hard. So when you start talking about these guys that are making 170, 180 million, $1 billion a year, whatever it is, which is happening at this top end of the wealth income, gap, that's what's skewing all of this household saving data. So again, the economy isn't nearly as strong as it appears because you have a lot of excess savings that are held by that top 10% of income earners who aren't going to be spending anymore. They've never stopped their spending run to any great degree. They may take an extra trip this year or whatever because they got to make up for last year, but their travel habits, their spending habits, once you're at that level, you're just buying what you want to buy. And it doesn't really matter. Inflation doesn't matter. Gas is $10 a gallon, so what? I just got $2 million last week on a paycheck. So, I'm good. Think about $170 million. What was it? $170 million over what, 4 years?
No, over 1 year.
That was 1 year.
That was 1 year. What they pulled in from salary endorsements, all the things that they have coming
Gotcha.
in.
So 1 year. So you take 52 weeks a year divided by 170 million. That's $3 million a week, a little more. So yeah, you can afford $10 gas.
Yeah.
Don't complain.
Yeah, no problem there. Well, the big problem is that most people can't. That is the far end of the spectrum here. You know, the average American, or well, I say the average, 40% of Americans, they don't have $1,000 in their savings account. Their rent increasing, that hurts. And 40% of Americans rent. So think about this: all the rental, has gone way up. Yeah. So rentals have gone through the roof because prices have gone up. People are still buying them left and right. At least they were. I think we're going to begin to see that maybe higher rates are starting to impact that. And we're seeing less and less home flippers as, what we historically saw. I think the average was like 22% of the homes sold were home flippers.
Right.
Or people buying them to rent and then turn around and sell them later. Now it's something like 10%. I think the access of capital is probably hurting them a little bit, increasing. But look, inflation's hurting. I mean, there's no doubt about it.
Yeah, and it was interesting yesterday, and this is part of this inflation issue that we're going to be talking about over the next couple of months, is that if you look at the Schiller Case Home Price Index, came out yesterday, that rose again, which again, those home prices are what feeds into what they call homeowners equivalent rent and the CPI. So again, that's that upward pressure that makes up 42% of the CPI calculation, which is home prices. That data is from April. So that came out yesterday. So that April data will feed into the June CPI report. But that's what I was talking about earlier, is talking about this big lag in the data. It's going to take several months. Now, we already know that home prices are declining. We're watching supply of houses rise rather sharply. We have about 12 months worth of supply now in the market. So a big jump in supply of homes for sale. We already know that traffic, according to Redfin and a lot of other indicators for new homes, is slowing sharply. So home prices, and again, we're watching other real-time data like how many people are cutting the price of their home to get it sold. We're watching those home price declines as well. So that's going to feed back into this data. But again, by the time we get to the June data, April, May, June, we're going to be August, September, October before we start seeing the real impact of home prices in the CPI data. So when you talk about inflation and what's happening there and what's going, but that doesn't even mean that food prices are going to be falling, that quickly, or gas prices either. It's just those are much smaller components of the overall index.
When you think about inflation, especially going back to homes, pre-pandemic, 20% of the homes went for over asking price. During the pandemic and after, 55% of homes were going for higher than asking price. And so, we talked to a lot of different realtors, people in the financial industry, real estate industry, and they're all saying, hey, it's not, you have to price these homes at more fair market value.
Yeah.
You're not going out there and they're not getting bid up as easily as they once were. So now they're seeing that you got to price it a little bit better. Things are taking longer to sell.
Yeah.
So it'll be interesting to see what these numbers look like you said, here in a couple of months when we look back and say, okay, where we are today versus, 3 months ago.
Yeah, no, it's very true. And again, we'll see a lot of this starting to happen. And again, it also depends. But what's interesting is when you take a look at homeowner, I'll spit that out. When you take a look at home price appreciation, it was very broad across all levels of homes. There's some other Census Bureau data that I track on a regular basis in terms of homes, and we take a look at the what we call renters, and these are people that are renting existing homes, or people that are buying homes, right, or buying existing homes as well. And what we had for a very long time was home ownership was at the same levels it was basically in 1964, right? It just home ownership had really, following the financial crisis, home ownership had really dropped off. Well, over the last 3 years, because of all this money kind of going in, pandemic funds, and like Danny was just saying, people were running out and buying homes, and we saw, big surge in millennials and younger people going out to buy houses, and so we had home ownership rates actually rise very sharply. But interestingly enough, since the beginning of this year, home ownership rate has dropped sharply. And the number of people renting houses are now back on the rise. And these two are very non-correlated. So when one rises, the other falls, and vice versa. So they're almost mirror images of each other. But it's interesting to see just since the beginning of this year, because of where home prices got to, because of rising interest rates, I can't afford to buy a house. all of a sudden we're starting to see home ownership rates drop and the number of people renting properties back on the rise again. So again, I think to your point, Danny, that tells you a lot about really kind of how financially strained a lot of people are. I mean, small changes to interest rates determines whether or not you can buy a house, and that shouldn't be the case.
Yeah, it's huge. I had a conversation with a guy this last week who, looking at home prices, said, man, I need to get out. I want to retire early. And so he said, give me some ideas. What can I do? Because I know I can't go out and rent because my rent will be much more expensive than my mortgage right now.
Yep.
So
I think you'd be surprised.
What do you mean?
Rents, I'm doing that right now.
Yeah.
Right. I was surprised at some of the rental prices that are available.
Really?
Yeah. And I mean, no, they're not cheap.
Yeah.
Mind you, but they were cheaper than my mortgage. So,
fair enough.
And so, when you take a look at,
well, look, when you're asking people to put a moat around your rental proproperty, I mean,
exactly, and alligators are hard to, upkeep, but it kept you out of my house.
That's true.
But there are alternatives. But again, it's
Correct.
also a function of choices, right?
There
So, you can't, go rent, just anything you want. You've got to be willing to sacrifice a little bit, but you can make it work.
No, you can. I mean, I've talked to people who are talking about, look, we're going to go live in our camper or our RV for a while. We're going to put it in a permanent spot, and we're going to save quite a bit.
Yeah.
And so if you can do that and start making some of these sacrifices along the way, I think you're going to come out on top. Like this guy's looking at it and saying, hey, I don't think prices are going to continue to rise the way that they have. If I can get out of this right now, I'm going to be in a much better situation financially. I get money in my pocket. Let me take advantage of this equity, and it's going to put me on track to retire earlier.
Yeah.
Not a bad thing.
And that's really our choice, which is downsize a bit. Kids are going to college.
Yep.
Downsize, rent for a while, closer to the office, so I don't have to drive. We'll save a good bit of money that way.
Not a bad idea.
Yep. You're still not going to let me retire, are you?
Plan says no.
Damn it. Be right back after the break. Don't go away.
You're listening to The Real Investment Show.
And welcome back to the show this morning. Inflation, of course, is kind of the big talk as we were, as of late. It just impacts everybody. We were talking earlier in the show about the average American doesn't have $1,000 in the bank, can't make ends meet. Of course, is a problem. It's interesting. 4th of July is right around the corner, and the cost of your 4th of July food is going to go up because I guess the question is how big's your hot dog going to be this year, Danny?
For many, it's not going to be very big. I mean, if you look at the cost, inflation's through the roof on food right now. I mean, ground beef's up 36%, chicken is up 33%. Now, there are two things that you may want to be able to do. So, strawberry shortcake, strawberries are down 16%.
Okay.
And cheese sandwiches.
I'm not coming to your house for the 4th of July.
Cheese sandwiches. So, cheese is down 13%.
Grilled cheese sandwiches at Danny's house.
Yeah.
Nothing says Happy Independence Day like grilled cheese.
That's right. That's right. What do you have on your grill today?
Cheese. But it is interesting. I mean, that we combat inflation two ways. So it'll be interesting to see when I talk about, when you go to the store to buy hot dogs, you see a lot of shrinkflation.
That's right.
Going on in food.
In everything. I mean, it's
Yeah.
amazing. You look at the bag of chips. We always talk about that. It gets smaller and smaller. I think Oreos,
Yeah.
same deal. And so as you look at these things, they've gotten very manipulative in how they do this because the packaging's still the same, but you realize instead of 16 ounces, it's 14 ounces.
Yeah. And yeah, it's very, very, it's like, reminds me of George Costanza, it was in the pool, Jerry. So,
Yeah.
shrinkage. But yeah, it's happening everywhere. This is, and we're going to see more of that. And of course, my wife just took this, one of those mail-in allergy tests,
Okay.
right? Food allergies to
Yep.
look at, and of course, her favorite, two of her favorite things in the world are eggs. She loves eggs, and chicken. Right? She eats a lot of chicken, and of course, she's sending her food allergy test, and it comes back. She can't have chicken, can't have turkey, can't have, can't have eggs. So she's pretty much miserable right now. But this, I said, hey, but look on the bright side. At least you can have steak, right?
That's true.
Still on the list.
I mean,
of course,
fish.
it's going up.
Yeah, everything. I mean, it's
So,
astronomical.
Yeah, so we just don't feed her, and she's been cranky lately. So
Hangry.
I'm very.
Yeah.
It's been tough.
We can't do that in our house. Kids, wife, everybody know.
Yeah, exactly.
Here, honey, do you need a Snickers?
Well, but to make ends meet, though, people are taking on part-time jobs. Article out today. You got to. The headline is interesting. This is like, how many people think you're an above-average driver? 80%, right? So, 93% of working Americans have a side hustle. 51% are considering it due to inflation, according to a new study. So, but 93% of Americans now, what are we talking about in terms of side hustles, right? Now, are we talking about, full, part-time jobs, working at the local convenience store? What we're talking about? No, the most popular side hustles are taking 95% of those that have a side hustle make their money taking online surveys. So,
online surveys.
Yes. So all these surveys that come out constantly, right?
Yeah.
You can now they'll pay you like $1 or $2 to take a survey, whatever it is. So
in the form of a gift card that you can't use at the store.
Probably.
Yeah.
But that's their side hustle. Is taking a survey. The other side of that is 18% also sell items online. Do freelance work online. There's online apps, like Fiverr and others where you can, sign up if you've got a particular trade craft of some sort, you're a handyman, whatever, you can put your skills up online and have people contact you to go do, work part-time. Selling used clothes online. This would be a job that my wife could do for the next 20 years. And just actually having a part-time job was about 6% of those people surveyed. That's actually a part-time job working, somewhere else for somebody else. But it was interesting that a lot of people, so out of the survey, 63% of those said that they need it for a little additional cash. 28% said that they need it due to inflation going up. They just need it. And this is what we were talking about earlier, is that people just need an ability to create some additional income to help cover bills. As they come in. So not surprising, people are starting to, and again, kind of in this gig economy, which, really started with, the rise of the smartphone about a decade ago. We had all these abilities, again, talking about apps that you can sign up for where you can do certain things. And if you are on TikTok or one of the social media channels, there's a tremendous number of people that come online that tell you how to sign up for certain things, become an advocate for some product or whatever, and people will pay you for doing this stuff. And there's all these kind of tricks that you can do online to generate revenue to pay bills. The average income for men is about $596 a month. For women, it's about $378 a month. So according to the survey.
I wonder what the disparity is there. What's the difference?
I don't know. It doesn't really break it down into why there's a disparity of income, probably on the ability to do different types of jobs. So for instance, if I'm I can probably make more money as a handyman.
Yeah.
Right. Which are mostly male dominated jobs.
Correct.
So I'm just guessing. I don't know, but that would
makes sense.
Yeah. So anyway, it was interesting.
That is interesting to think that so many people are looking at alternative aspects to bring in additional income, which I always think is great, but I guess it's shifted as far as what people are doing, where that side hustle used to be, working at somewhere at night or stocking shelves or, now Uber drivers, things like that. And for people to sit at home and take surveys.
There's all kinds of things you can do.
But how much money are you getting from that? I'm just trying to think from a tax perspective. What a pain in the rear for somebody who maybe didn't have to even worry about filing, taxes, or probably had a very easy tax scenario. Their situation changes when you get a bunch of 1099s for.
Yeah, no, it's definitely true. But that's also kind of the interesting thing about selling stuff online. If you just put stuff up on Facebook and sell it for cash, don't have to pay taxes.
It's true.
Oh, you should pay taxes, right? But I'm just not. I'm just saying who reports it. So.
Well, that's right. I mean, I think that's like you see a lot of waiters and waitresses that probably don't report everything, and there's avenues for you to do that.
Yeah, absolutely. But this kind of goes back to, also too, when, people are trying to save up for college. I've got 2 kids getting ready to leave for college and just right around the corner. 529 plans have been a kind of a big source of college funding, or college savings, I should say. Gross tax deferred, has a lot of benefits. Take the money out tax-free if you pay for certain college expenses, et cetera. Some changes coming to that, though, apparently?
Well, we hope. There's actually legislation out because I think one of the bigger problems that people run into is they think, okay, well, I'm going to put these funds aside, if they don't use it for college, you can use it, move it over to somebody else, change the beneficiary if it's in the immediate family. But most people are concerned on, well, what happens if we don't use all these funds? We take them out, and then you get penalized because you're not using it for education, and you pay taxes on all of it. And they say, well, maybe it's not the smartest investment. So there's actually legislation out that's going to potentially allow, if this goes through, I'm not sure how much legs this has. I mean, these are things we talk about, and then nothing ever comes to fruition. But there's talks that it's going to allow you to move those funds into a Roth IRA, which I think would be fantastic.
Yeah.
So if you don't use them for the purposes intended, which is college education, tuition, room and board,
Books.
travel to and from, books. I mean, it's pretty wide spectrum as far as what you can use this. It's not just for college; it's for higher education. It could be for a trade school, and there's actually been changes to allow you to use it for secondary school prior to college. So there's some great avenues. Most people use it for college because you're going to save, start early, and you're going to put funds aside, hopefully on a regular basis, and have those funds grow over a long period of time. But the bigger concern is hopefully going to be mitigated here by allowing people to put those funds and roll them over to the Roth to continue that tax-free growth, which I think is fantastic.
Well, and too, I mean, what a lot of people don't know about 529 plans is, I've got 4 kids. So let's say I bought the 529 plan for my oldest kid and he decides not to go to college. Well, I can pass it to one of my other kids.
Correct.
And, so if I buy 4 of them, for each of the kids and one of them decides not to go or changes their mind or whatever, besides y'all are going to have to find them buried in the back 40. But, I can roll that down to, roll what was not used into the other 529 plans to be used. So there's a lot of flexibility to 529 plans that are great for, saving and paying for college.
Yeah, I think that it seems like it used to be, it was the number one place for people to put funds for college for quite some time. Yeah. But here recently, I don't know if it's the just changes on how people view it. People are deciding maybe not to utilize them as often. And then there's also some caveats surrounding, who owns it, who's the custodian on the account. And that's another big aspect of it because you don't want to mess up. We've been doing webinars on FAFSA. You can actually go look them up on our YouTube channel. Chris Liebum, he's an expert in this area. And, we've discussed this on air. But you want to make sure that you own these in the right places because if you go file for FAFSA looking for grants or student aid, it can actually negatively impact you if you don't set these up properly.
That's right. And again, this is also, part of, the whole issue with, financial aid, scholarships, all that. You got to be very careful about what you gift to children too. So if you're gifting to kids, doing the annual gift tax, estate, whatever, and you're building assets up in their name, that can impact them from getting, access to grants. There's a lot of things you can get tripped up on pretty quick, trying to get, federal assistance for college.
Yeah, and that's another aspect too. A lot of people don't even fill those forms out, and I think everybody should because you don't want to leave anything on the table. Potential for grants. We want to look for scholarships, look for all different types of ways to pay for college. And yet we're so hung up on trying to pay for it ourselves and save, which is fantastic, right? I want everybody to take that personal responsibility. But at the end of the day, there's a lot of scholarships, a lot of grants that go unused.
Exactly, it does. And, and of course, a lot of parents also make the mistake of, hey, you know what? I'm going to sacrifice my retirement to pay for my kids' college.
That's a big one.
Be right back after the break.
The Real Investment Show.
And welcome back to the show. Get ready to wrap things up this morning. Danny Ratliff joining me. Futures have turned around this morning. We were a little bit negative after yesterday's sell-off. Market futures are turning up now. Dow's up about 32 points. NASDAQ's heading back towards flat. S&P's up about 2 points. Again, as I noted at the beginning of the show this morning, yesterday's sell-off was a bit surprising because we had such a strong week last week. Ran right into resistance. Markets turned around yesterday. Pretty big sell-off. Really on the back of pretty dismal economic news coming out. Again, it's just been one kind of bad report after another. Yesterday was the Richmond Fed Manufacturing Index, took a big tumble. Also, consumer sentiment, also from the Census Board, from the Conference Board, took a big drop as well. All of those, suggesting that a economic recession is pending. Now, whether or not we can avoid that is going to be an entirely different story. But as we started out talking about it on the show, a lot of economists are looking at, well, we have very high savings rate. We've got all this cash, sitting out there. There's, people are doing fine. They've got plenty of money. Consumers doing okay. The problem is once you strip down and look at kind of the median and bottom levels of individuals, that's not really the case. They're spending everything they have plus some. We run a indicator on our website every now and then in our articles talking about the savings gap. And what the savings gap looks at is inflation-adjusted standard of living going back to 1960. And then we look at that standard of living compared to how much people have in savings and in incomes. So you have your savings in your bank, you have your income coming in, that's what you're living on. And how much does it require in debt? How much additional debt do you have to take on every year just to meet that standard of living? And up until about 1990, people didn't have to take on debt to sustain that standard of living. Starting in 1990 and really 2000 in particular, because we all decided we wanted to live in bigger houses and we had low interest rates so we could afford to buy things, and we started doing adjustable rate mortgages and started really increasing our standard of living. It now requires about $6,000 a year in debt just to, along with all your savings and income, just to make ends meet. And that's why so many people are in debt. That's when we continue to see record levels of credit card debt, and we see these type of things because it's just, for a large chunk of Americans, it is a function. If they don't have that credit card debt available to them, they can't pay bills.
We're so concerned with the government running a deficit, yet most households do.
Yeah, by a large margin.
Yeah. Well, and I think it's a leveraging of everything, right? The financialization of it all, where people can leverage. It's easy, and it allows you to, have a higher standard of living. But you have to remember, you're robbing from your future every time that you're utilizing debt in this way. I mean, I think there's great ways you can use leverage, but it's unfortunate that many people are just utilizing it for their day-to-day needs.
Yeah, and it's interesting too because it's true. We've given people access to money in just all kinds of different ways. Credit cards, cheap loans, this, that, the other thing. 401k plans. I got an email yesterday, and we've written articles in the past talking about the dangers of 401k loans, and you should not ever take out a 401k loan. It's there's a lot of myths around, but it's cheap money. They don't charge me very much money. I can borrow against my 401k plan, and then I can pay it back. Sounds great on the surface, but there's a whole lot of bad that goes along with that. First of all, you're borrowing dollars from your 401k plan that you put in pre-tax, and you're paying that back with after-tax dollars. So you're completely negating the whole purpose of the pre-tax savings that you put in. Plus, you're accruing an interest payment on that, and those funds aren't growing. But one of the big problems, and this was the email I got yesterday, and particularly if you have a 401k loan right now, and you're at risk of losing your job, if you lose your job, that 401k loan has to be settled. And it has to be settled like right now. So, these are the risks that occur, and why, not all leverage and not all debt is good debt. There's certain debt that's doable, and and certainly if you're buying a piece of real estate, that's good leverage, right? I can buy a house, I buy a $500,000 house for, $50,000 down if I'm putting 20% in. $100,000 now if I'm putting 20%, $50,000 at 10. Nowadays you can get a loan for 3, so you can get a lot of leverage on a house. That's okay as long as you can afford the mortgage payment. There's a lot of debt that's not good debt. Credit card debt and borrowing against your 401k plan is not a good idea.
Well, let's take a step back on the 401k plan. So most plans will allow you to take 50% of the value that you have in the account.
That's right.
And so let's just easy math. You have 100,000, you can take 50,000. So what Lance is referring to is that if you quit your job, you lose your job, that 50,000 becomes taxable income almost immediately. Most of the time, they're not going to allow you to continue on a payment plan because you no longer have a paycheck that they can pull from to repay that loan.
Right.
And so people get their tax bill like, holy smokes, I just had an additional X amount of income that was realized that they didn't think that they were going to have to worry about. And so it's something that catches a lot of people by surprise. First of all, we don't want, we call that leakage, right? There's so many holes in the dam, right? And we don't want that to be one of them. And unfortunately, many people use it as an easy way to access funds. our argument is always, we talk about the hierarchy of savings. We want to have the emergency fund, the financial vulnerability cushion. The 401k should be one of the last places you go towards because that's not designed for your immediate needs. It's not designed for things that you want right now. Now, granted, if you absolutely need it, yeah, it's going to be there. But I would say that I would exhaust all other avenues before you touch that 401k or IRA for that matter, because that is intended for retirement. And especially when you don't have your human capital, which you would hopefully obviously have while you're still working. So I always encourage people to stay away from that. I think here at RIA, you would hear that as a resounding, bell from everybody that do not touch that.
Yeah. And it is. It's just there's so many things that you don't realize when you get into 401k loans. Tax consequences, how the impact of paying back the loan with after-tax dollars. I mean, there's a lot of these other nuances that a lot of people just don't consider. And they just look at it as, oh, it's cheap money and I can just pay it back and it's all fine. But it's not really as clean and as simple as, a lot of people kind of take it to be at the surface. So the point is really do your homework. And again, I think the government's done a lot of disservice to people as well. When we got into the pandemic, they said, oh, yeah, you can access your 401k plan early. That's not really helping people. The median 401k plan is about 1 year's salary, which is $55,000 to $80,000. The average retiree has about $130,000 on average in their 401k plan. That's not going to get you through retirement. So the last thing you really want to be doing is that's your retirement bucket. If you got nothing else going on in terms of savings, and for a lot of people, their 401k plan is all they have, man, start selling stuff at home, before you touch that 401k plan, because that's all you've got in a lot of cases for retirement.
Well, you could take a cue from Bed Bath & Beyond. I mean, they've cut down their AC. Hey, inflation hurts and hits everyone. So cost of utility prices have gone way up. I think there's a lot of things that people can do. And, one thing I see, Lance, especially with the 401k loans, is usually people are using these for things they want, not necessarily what they need. Oh, you know what? I'm going to use it for the backyard pool. We're going to use it for, a new vehicle or whatever it may be.
Yeah,
and
cheap money.
Yeah, it is. And, you feel like, okay, well, it's already here. I'm not going to pay any interest. I'm paying myself back. The interest goes back into the 401k. And it's just not always the best avenue to do so. So take that, I'd use that very cautiously. But there are ways that you can cut back, Lance. I think that's what we're seeing more and more people do. It's interesting. I saw an article that said financial advisors should not use the word inflation because it's going to scare people into cutting back. Well, I think people are already doing that. And I don't think that's something that we need to shy away from. I think it's something we need to address head on. And many people don't even know what their own inflation is. We talk about the Atlanta Fed, coming out with their own inflation numbers. You can go to, they actually have a tool and a calculator that you can see what your inflation is for your age and demographic. But I think it's one of those things where people, we talk about the 4-letter word in financial planning, and it's a budget. Nobody wants to ever do a budget. But the great thing about a budget, especially in a time like this, is that you can actually calculate and understand what your own inflation is just from what you spent last year to what you're spending now. And then that gives you some ideas as far as maybe other ways that you can cut back. And I'm telling you, we visit with people every day, and there are a lot of people who are cutting back in many different ways. And, once we see these higher prices, I think, like you've always said, the cure for high inflation is high inflation. And we're beginning to see that now where people are saying, you know what, maybe we're gonna veer and go a different route here. We're not going to spend as much. We're going to cut back on our trip. We're going to find other avenues to save money, or we may see our shopping will change. We've seen Procter and Gamble, Kimberly Clark. These guys are all coming out and saying the consumer is changing. They're buying the discount brands now. They're shopping differently. They're clipping coupons, and I think that we're going to see more and more of that. And as that changes, that does become deflationary at some point. I think we're more concerned about disinflation or stagflation at the moment, though, right?
That's right. So get ready to wrap up the show this morning. Danny, any last minute comments or events coming up we need to know about?
I think our next event is not till August 4th. So we're actually doing Inflation Nation. So this is going to be our next webinar, August 4th. Richard and myself, we're going to talk about all the things that you can do to keep more money in your pocket. What are other things that you should be thinking about at this moment? And then obviously, what's on everybody's mind, investments in this time. How do you invest? What do stocks, bonds look like? And, that's one of the things that it's tough to navigate for many because these areas that have typically been kind of a safe haven, they haven't been so this year.
Yeah, yeah, things haven't worked out exactly as everybody planned.
Correct.
Yeah, even Kathy Wood.
Oh, man, especially Kathy Wood.
All right, that wraps up the show for the day. Of course, NASDAQ futures have now turned positive. They're up about 14 points this morning. S&P up as well, Dow up. So we'll see if this kind of early morning enthusiasm can follow up and reverse some of those losses from yesterday as we get ready to wrap up the end of the quarter. Still have that end of the quarter window dressing going on here. We'll see what happens over the next couple of days. Be sure and stick around. Our 3 minutes of markets coming up. Danny, thanks so much today.
Thank you.
Get Mike Liebowitz' latest article on the website, and make sure and check out our digital platform, SimpleVisor.com, where you get all of our research and portfolios there as well, SimpleVisor.com. Have a great day. See you back here tomorrow. We'll get with Michael Liebowitz on the Fed and what happens next on interest rates and inflation. See you then.
Things I could do if I had a little money. It's a rich man's world. It's a rich man's world.